Okay, so I got your follow-up document. Let me pull it up here. So it looks like you're doing really good.
Yes. Yes.
So let's go through. Okay, you can see the screen.
Yep.
Okay. So since your last appointment, went through the day, kept record, which is increasing. Yay, that's fantastic. Saw all my food and add fatty oils. Wonderful. Vegan, manual, increased fats. Snacking regularly with high fat proteins. Perfect. Continue to uphold the strict day of no gluten, dairies, nightshades. Perfect. Now, with your diet, are you having any energy fluctuations or no?
No, actually, I've been feeling really good, especially since I started taking the anacetyl.
And acetylcysteine? Perfect.
Yeah. And I noticed that I didn't have to, I don't know if it was on this form, because I was just having issues with making some of the updates. But one of the changes was that I just don't feel the heavy abdominal cramping that I was feeling, and I don't have to rely on the Imodium as much. So
Oh,
that's becoming less. Yeah. Now I'm just kind of taking it just as a like a precaution, but I haven't had any flare-ups, knock on wood.
yeah. So remember last time we did a follow-up where your glyphosate levels are high, and then suggested you take the 1,500 milligrams of NAC just to support clearance of chemicals and specifically glyphosates because they go through that glutathione pathway. You probably want to take that indefinitely all the way through your prenatal care and into your pregnancy. It's
Okay.
it's not something that has any adverse effects. It's just an amino acid, so it's not like you'd be worried about it even if you were pregnant, of any adverse issues or uh,
Mm.
any
I
kind
can
of
just keep taking this.
yeah, the NAC. And we'll go over your chemical reactivity panel, your updated.
I'm sorry, you said up to 1,500 milligrams?
Yeah,
It's still safe even through pregnancy.
1,500 milligrams twice a day, which is like 3,000 milligrams. Yeah, it's sulfur amino acid, and it's not like a botanical that pushes a lot of different pathways. It just provides the sulfur amino acid structure, so your liver pathways um, can make glutathione, and also to support something called sulfation, which is sulfur binding to toxic chemicals, so it can become water soluble, so you can eliminate it. So you can take that. You should take that for at least a while, and
Okay.
it's not bad to do. Okay, and then the other thing we
Okay.
talked about also last time, since we're on this topic, was also you were going to try to work on some muscle mass building and exercise. Were you able to do any of that?
Yes, I have not, but only because we've just had a lot of changes in logistics over the summer. And so our schedules were just a little bit crazy. But that is going to change. So I'm just getting over a really, really bad head cold that's laid us out this week. But
Okay.
I'm taking that very seriously to start weightlifting. But the reason I hadn't was just because the schedule was wonky. And at that point, I was just making sure that I stayed consistent on my snacks
Okay.
and sleep and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. I've not been taking blood pressure regularly. That's okay, because I should. I do, however, have my average based on when I do take my blood pressure. So, what is your blood pressure running now?
Uh, I had it written down.
Okay.
It hadn't changed from the last time. I think it was like 90s, oh gosh, 96. It's in the higher 90s,
Okay.
but I'm not really passing the 100 mark on the whatever
on
the
the on the
first
upper.
on the upper, yeah.
Okay. No problem. Just every now and then check it, just at some point. As
Yeah.
your weight increases, your blood sugar gets more stable. Your adrenal glands should get healthier. As,
Right.
as your adrenal glands get healthier, they should be able to retain more sodium, and your blood pressure shouldn't drop as much. There's a pathway with aldosterone that controls sodium regulation, but it could take some time to rebuild. And everything else is good there. Okay, so great, feel great. Just really want to get to 115, 18 pounds soon. Great. So you're on your way. You're doing all the right things. You figured out how to eat without having energy roller coaster rides. So you got your snacks figured out. Okay. So bad breath. So bad breath is either going to either come from your gut, especially your upper gut, upper GI, or it's going to come from your mouth. And mouth sometimes is overlooked. I don't know if you have any cavities or any kind of dental issues. Have you looked into any of that?
No, I think we did talk about this one the last time as well. I think that had to do with just the digestion part, but I think this is actually getting better.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, this is actually getting better.
I mean, the
So,
most common thing is just you're not digesting and breaking down your proteins.
yeah.
You need some bacterial fermentation and get some odors released from that. Um, Typically, hydrochloric acid supplements, digestive enzymes, apple cider vinegar, they can help improve your digestion. But if it's getting better, that's good. You might even want to do a trial where you're taking digestive enzymes, correct?
Mhm.
You might want to just try to increase your dosage and see if that makes a difference.
I think that she's taking the digestive enzymes, but I don't know how frequently you're
It's
taking them.
not, it's not
It's
as consistent.
it's betaine, the HCl,
Yeah,
which
it's perfect.
is I think what you recommended last time, Dr. K.
Yeah.
And then, but I think she needs to just be more consistent.
Yeah.
So the hydrochloric acid just creates an environment where the bacteria doesn't grow. Like you could have a little bit of bacterial overgrowth in your gut, and it causes the smell. So it's a sign though, but it is a sign you're not making as much digestive enzymes as you need to, and
Right.
you probably need to support it. Okay, so just keep track on that. But your GI symptoms are okay, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like you have any symptoms.
No,
Yeah,
no, I've actually been feeling really, really good.
Yeah. So look at this metabolic assessment form. You can
Sorry, really quickly. I missed probably a rhetorical question. I can keep taking this through the betamine HCl through pregnancy.
Yeah. You might be more intolerant as your anatomy changes, but it just helps you digest your food, and it's an enzyme. Typically like micronutrients and minerals and digestive enzymes, they're not contraindicated during and throughout pregnancy. The only thing is some botanicals can sometimes be of concern. And the problem is, it's not that certain botanicals are known to cause problems. It's just certain a lot of these botanicals have never been studied during pregnancy, and that's where like we don't know, we're not sure. There's a few that can maybe cause some hormonal issues, but people are they're not anything on your list of things that you're taking. Now, when you look at the gut, because when you look at your, like, for example, you see offensive breath here. This is one of the symptoms of having lack of hydrochloric acid, which you would sometimes see with belching, burping, bloating, gas falling immediately after a meal, sense of fullness during a meal. You don't have any of those other associated symptoms, right? Okay. But so if you had those other associated symptoms and bad breath, then for sure it would like really increase your hydrochloric acid. But I would increase it anyways. This could just be one of the things that's just prominent with you. And
yeah, it's gotten better. I actually had tried to make an update, like, because I had taken the forms before and just tried to make the tweaks and the updates, and there was a couple things that didn't save properly.
Yeah.
But this one I would have put that a level 1, not a level 2.
Okay. Okay. And then overall, just like we're not seeing any major symptoms. You're still doing good since we last talked. Let's see here. What do you call? I hope to have a solid plan for my next step, phase 3, my health journey based on the results of my latest lab work. Okay, I'll go over those. No problem. Also determine if any other tests recommended since one group was canceled. Yeah, that was the urinary chemical toxin one. I think we were trying to do it through Genova, right? And then they canceled the test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Great Plains has one. And, the key thing was really like, I think you're on your way to, well, I think when you look at back of initially like being on way too much thyroid hormones and just having your metabolic issue off, unstable, your blood sugar unstable, and autoimmunity flare-ups all the time, and neuroinflammation, like you seem to have been able to work with your diet and lifestyle to kind of really get that calmed down. The second goal you had, the original paperwork, was just to get you healthy for pregnancy. So last time you said you guys are about a year away. So in this year away, one of the key things to really try to do is just doing everything you're doing as you increase your weight, not become underweight, you reduce risk of complications. And the other thing is just to try to really support your chemical load and trying to reduce your chemical exposure as much as you can. So the N-acetylcysteine can help with that. I don't know, and you're taking other, just general things that can also support those pathways. But the key thing is just to really focus on that. So we can do like a chemical pesticide panel. There's through Great Plains, the same place that did your glyphosate test. But right now, I don't know if we need to rush into it because we already have a lot of information with your glyphosate test and your chemical immune reactivity panel. So let me go through that really quick. And before I go there, let me just make sure I cover this last one. So on this point, we'll go over that and what the tests do. And then you said the fish oil and turmeric pills have been a saver, keeping inflammation down. Perfect. Just stay on those. Been able to less Imodium, Largally, perfect. So you might just need general anti-inflammatory support for the rest of your life. And And N-acetylcysteine is there too. Like when you think of nutrients, like people think of like a micronutrient is like, why do I need to keep taking a supplement? Do I have a deficiency? No, it's not that you may have a deficiency. You just might have greater demands for damping your inflammation because you have subtle autoimmunity. So you have greater anti-inflammatory requirements. And if you listen to your body as you are, you'll know like what's working for you, what isn't working for you, even what dosages, right? So that's the most important
And
thing.
does it matter if I take the N-acetylcysteine with or without food? Because the directions say take it on an empty stomach, but I've been doing both just to
You can
see.
do either. It's still going to be absorbed well. Yeah. There's okay. And then again, nothing really major symptom wise. No bouts of recent neuroinflammation, which is really, really get your brain symptoms. Okay, so now you see this test here. This is the one you just did. This is the chemical immune reactivity test. So this is not measuring the total levels in your body. This is measuring if your immune system is reacting to chemicals.
Right.
And the immune system reacting to chemicals is different than toxic load. Okay. So toxic load is important to us. Like the glyphosate test we did, which your levels were higher, were on the higher end. They're indicating that you have a load, like your body's either getting too much exposure or not clearing it. Okay. The most common source of glyphosates are typically in foods, especially in grains. I know, like you recently found that the oatmeal was helping you. That could be a source of some glyphosates. But those are just things to really think about. Over time, we can see if those levels drop. But
really quick, we were also thinking because I sometimes have tortilla chips, and because they're corn based, that be a culprit.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of everywhere, everywhere at this point. But corn chips and grains, like if you Google highest source of glyphosates, because there's been many studies that have actually published them, you can kind of see a list and see if you're getting a lot of exposure to some of those foods. You'll see like oats and grains and even corn has a high amount of these glyphosate compounds. It's basically cereals and grains and corns are really where a lot of these glyphosates are highest in. Okay. So you do want to lower that for sure. So, there's a point where I know you guys like thought like a year out, maybe that's when you start thinking about starting a family. We should kind of see where you are, maybe do a follow-up test before, and really go completely strict of any of those foods and and really bump up your detox pathways, or are you able to just continue to improve with what you're doing? Okay. Now this test, this one you did array number 11, this is measuring for chemical immune reactivity. That's why you see like IgG or IgM or IgA. Those are antibodies. So these aren't measuring levels, but they're measuring an immune response or an antibody response. Just like if you have antibodies against foods, which is the immune chemical response. This is measuring that. We find this to be extremely important when it comes to autoimmunity and inflammation. So these foods can really trigger the inflammatory response. They can be a trigger for autoimmunity and so forth. Okay, so that's the difference between load and chemical immune reactivity. This is a chemical immune reactivity panel. And these are actually the chemicals that have the highest association that so far we know about directly linked to triggering autoimmunity. Okay, so we want to, obviously we want all these to be in the green. And then when we see them in the red, the first question to ask is, are you getting exposures? And how do you reduce your exposures? And sometimes it's not very clear. Like I'll give you an example, like isocyanates. Have you had a chance to look them up at all?
I think in the beginning when
you first saw it,
yeah.
So they're basically going to be like an insulating compound. Like if you go to any like newly developed home, or if you're getting any homework, if you're getting any kind of demolition in your home or your kitchen or somewhere, you're gonna have isocyanates everywhere because they're in the insulation of homes or in the the foamy stuff they use around anything like plastic foam material that you see that's used around cars or anything is isocyanates. There's some isocyanate levels in some drinking water, but the only thing I would tell you with this that you could do as a lifestyle action is just really make sure you do not, if there's any like development being done, if you go to like Starbucks and Starbucks in the remodeling or anywhere you're in the remodeling, try to get out of there. Like those areas, those things are in the air.
Okay, good to know.
And the most important thing with all these chemicals is really like your everyday routine exposure. So you don't know if you have like anything in your bedroom. So the bedroom is the most important because you're in there for so many hours per day because you're sleeping. You don't have any uncompleted work or anything like that in your bedroom?
I actually work in our bedroom. This is where we are now. Like there's like a separate corner. So I'm in the room all the time.
But there's no like
But
exposed
there's
installation.
But there's
yeah.
no like uncompleted work or exposure
Yeah.
to those chemicals. Okay. Now these other ones like benzene ring, anything in yellow is still a concern to us. And the one in yellow here is like benzene rings. So benzene rings is just going to be from smoke. So the two main sources are going to be secondhand smoke and being in exhaust fumes from being in a car.
Okay.
Any exposure there?
No, we have an electric car.
No.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Do you guys get so if you ever notice if you're traveling or you're driving and you get stuck in traffic and there's a lot of exhaust and cars aren't moving, it's probably not good for you there because you're directly reacting to it. And listen, benzene isn't good for anyone, but it's not about being good or bad as a chemical that creates some load. Like you're having an antibody reaction to it. So for you, you can have inflammatory immune reactions generated by it. So if you're really stuck in traffic, it's probably better to get off the road, go get a tea or something or get some food and then
Wait
get
it out.
If you were to put on, say, the air condition on recirculate so that there's no, because we typically drive with just air conditioned.
I mean, the better your car air filter system, but you still do get some of that into your system. You also want to if you're ever in a place with lots of cigarette smoke, secondhand smoke, you definitely want to be away from that. I mean, it could be just as much as of a trigger for you as certain foods that can trigger your inflammation and autoimmunity. Right. And sometimes it's like a perfect storm. It's like you didn't get enough sleep, you're already a little bit stressed, and now you got exposed to, you were stuck in a room with cigarette smoke for a while, and that was like the thing that kind of caused a little flare up. And other times you got plenty of rest and you were fine and your inflammation was down, you got some exposure and didn't react. So all these different autoimmune triggers tend to be like a cumulative effect, they kind of all pile in together. It's not going to always correlate, but you just have to be conscious of it, that you're having a specific immune response to these benzene compounds.
That makes sense. I'm
Bonfires?
so glad.
Bonfires.
Oh, that's right. So sometimes we have bonfires.
Yeah.
Full
moon bonfires.
Typically end by the smoke.
Yeah, no, we're not typically by the smoke. It's like maybe once a month at the max, but we normally don't do it every day. But I'm not standing by
Sit around the smoke site. Enjoy your fire. Just stay away from the smoke site. Wherever the wind's blowing, just make a really conscious effort. Like it's flowing into me. Let me sit over here.
Good to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then BPA binding protein and bisphenol A, they're really the same chemical exposure, which is plastics. So
yeah, I'm so plastics. We try to use glass as much as possible. I stopped drinking out of plastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are your sources of plastic now?
Just food containers, but I try not to use them. I mean, sometimes we run out or I'm freezing something and I'll put it in plastic, but I try to avoid it at all costs.
Okay. So they do have glass, ceramic, metal food containers.
So the answer is yes. We
Yes.
have glass, and typically we try to use the majority of glass. Anything that we're storing the food in. If anybody's gonna use the plastic, it's typically me.
Yeah. Okay.
We store some few things in like rice and stuff.
So the key thing with plastic too, it's the biggest issues is if it gets heated. That's when you really break the bonds and have release. So like heating food in plastics, always a bad idea. Drinking through a coffee lid, really bad idea. Like it's just going to really increase your BPA load. And again, it's not about the BPA exposure for you, but even trace amount of BPA exposure could just be like a trace amount of gluten or a food you're reactive to. Yes. So it can be a trigger. So again, these aren't about total load, and obviously BPA isn't good for anyone. But once again, just to understand the concept, you're having immune reactivity to BPA. So, as the perfect storm can happen on a day where you have too many variables where immune system is just, not functioning well, the trigger could be, significant at a time, the right time for you. So definitely don't drink through coffee lids. Don't heat up any plastics, and then convert to glass. What do you drink water out of every day?
I have stainless steel.
Perfect. Just stick with
it's funny because the lid, yeah, he drinks, but that's his. So I do have a plastic lid on this. Should I just not use it?
Those plastic lids are very temperature resistant. and I don't think you're going to be getting a lot of BPA exposure through that because it's like high quality. The ones at Star like at coffee ones, like the cheapest plastic, they could literally melt. No, temperature. That's where you're gonna get a lot of BPA load. So I think if you drink through the lid with cold things, it shouldn't be an issue. If it's hot things, I still think the chemical composition of those are pretty good. But if you want to be extra safe, then
Yeah, I usually keep it on just to keep the temperature cold, and then like I'll take it off and get like a really good gulp when I'm drinking it, just not really using it. Yeah.
I did this like I did the same thing. I have this, and I'm like, plastic. So I take it off.
Yeah.
You gotta put it back on so it doesn't get cold. But
Exactly. No, I think it's a better habit for me. I mean, whatever helps me feel better and to have a healthy pregnancy and healthy kids,
Yeah.
to me, like there's nothing that I really wouldn't sacrifice to make that happen. So these are like very small sacrifices to work with. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. And then parabens, do you have any, if you look into your makeup sources, cosmetics, those are the most.
Well, I don't really, I only wear eyeliner and then mascara on my lashes. I was wearing from a brand actually am called Bare Minerals.
Okay.
Because I would always gauge at Cosmetic Database, which is now called the Environmental Working Group. I used their website for like decades to just navigate me. And that was the only one because I used to use Revlon, but I found out it had an endocrine disruptor, and I used that since I was really young. Okay. So I picked that like maybe 10 years ago, and I've been using Bare Minerals ever since. Other than that, I really don't put much else on my face. Could it maybe come from like a moisturizer or something?
That's possible. Just to kind of do a little bit of investigation, like I was saying, sometimes you just can't directly find the source. Like you have mixed heavy metals. Like so what this means what they do at Cyrex with this one is they do like mercury, lead, aluminum, all kind of combined and see if you react to it. And they do mercury by itself, but they found just if they mix a lot of different toxic environmental heavy metals together and see if there's on a plate and see if there's reaction. There's some clues that it's happening. That's really hard to really find like a direct source for that, But again,
I did mercury by itself years ago, and I think that was part of my package when I first.
Right, and yet in your blood. I remember you had elevated level in your blood, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so in any case, it's just something to look at. Now, there's one part of it where you have these immune reactivities to these chemicals. So you want to know about them, and if you identify sources, limit them as much as you can. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mixed heavy metals, it's really hard to find. It's not like you're breaking down metal and eating it all day or something. It's just it's in the soil, it's in some plants, it's some foods. We all get some trace amounts to them. And the interesting thing is you may not have like really high levels of exposure to these chemicals. You can just have a small amount, and but your immune system just has a reaction to them. So that's the key thing. So again, may not be a high load. It's just like you might be just eating some foods and plants that have some mixed heavy metals in the soil, and no one else is having any issues with it. And maybe you're even getting less of the load for them because you're not eating as much of them. But it doesn't matter. Your immune system is still reacting to them. You may not be able to remove all the sources. And ultimately what this comes down to is something that's called immune chemical tolerance. So meaning, let's say we take 10 other people and we measure the actual levels of chemicals they have, the total load they have. They may have much more than you, but when they do Cyrex Ray 11, they don't have chemical reactivity. They don't have autoimmunity.
Right.
So again, that's how you have to think of these things. Now, with these chemical immune reactivities, it really goes back down to just keeping the immune system from not flaring up like an autoimmune response over time. So the more you continue to improve your gut microbiome, the more your blood sugar stays stable, the more your immune system gets to not flare up. That by itself starts to change chemical immune tolerance. But while you know which chemicals are reacting and you have the possibility to look for some sources and remove them, then you definitely want to do that. And like for sure, things like plastics and cigarette smoke and exhaust and fires that have benzene rings in them, you want to reduce your exposure, and also know that they could be a trigger for you at certain times in your immune health, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I've noticed a game changer too, which is taking also L-glutamine every day.
Perfect. Yeah,
Once a
L-glutamine
day,
is,
and I'm being on that long term.
yeah, that seems like it's always been something that's helped you. Like L-glutamine and acetylcysteine ongoing, not a bad idea.
Yeah, and the fish oil and the
And
turmeric.
it shows, yeah, you might have to just do that. I mean, you'll support pathways that you're vulnerable to since you have subtle you have an autoimmune inflammatory pattern.
Mhm.
Dr. King, is there anything that she could take similar to these other amino acids that help reduce the heavy metals in the body, or that help eliminate, or anything that she could
So,
take?
so again, this test is not measuring how much level we have, right?
Okay.
That would require a different test, and that would be like a quantitative test. This is just for immune chemical reactivity. So we could definitely check. When we do the pesticide urinary thing, we can check for that. Now there are, they call it. There's some chemicals that are persistent pollutants and non-persistent pollutants, or to say differently, there's some chemicals your body can clear through its own detox pathways. So basically, you have chemicals, they go to your liver makes them water soluble, then you sweat it out, pee it out, or have it combined with your fecal material and eliminate it, right? That's how it works. That's how we get rid of chemicals. Okay. And then certain chemicals cannot leave your body through that pathway. And those are like heavy metals. So those
Right.
cannot be metabolized or detoxified through your system. Now, isocyanates, benzene rings, BPA, parabens, they can all be detoxified through your normal liver, and N-acetylcysteine will definitely help you with that. Okay. The heavy metals themselves cannot. And this is where people go into chelation therapy. And then they measure heavy metals through a test. So you can definitely do a chemical test to measure heavy metals. You've had some high in the blood, and when you look at the total load of chemicals, your blood levels indicate like recent exposure. And I think we repeated that test with you because we want to make sure your blood levels weren't high of anything. But they don't tell what's in your tissues, what's stuck and binding to your tissues. And then some people would do something like a EDTH, like chelation challenge test. They do a urinary test and they have a person take a chelator. And the chelating is an agent that binds to chemicals before and after before urine collection. And then they see if the levels rise when they take the chelator. And that indicates like, yeah, you're getting rid of these chemicals. And every single person that does that test will have higher levels because the chelating agent is going to pull some chemicals out. Does that make sense? The only concern with some of these chelating agents are some animal studies have shown that these chemical EDTA, like EDTA, which is a chemical binder that was not only used for the test, but then becomes a treatment to get rid of mercury and heavy metals. DMPS, DMSA, these are all of these chelating compounds. They've been shown to redistribute chemicals into the brain, into the nervous system, and into tissues. And also what we find is when people have antibodies to them, when they start to chelate, they get really flared up because they're going to pull it from your tissue into your blood. So like for me, I typically would prefer to not see this immune reactivity to the chemicals. Like you have mixed metals before you even consider like doing a chelation challenge test or even doing chelation. Because even doing a EDTA or DMSA, DMPS challenge test, we take a chelator, is going to increase your blood loads of heavy metals. And if your immune system is reacting to it, you can trigger an inflammatory response. So I think you definitely want to investigate it. Like, as you get closer, I would say do what you're doing right now. And then we definitely want to like check pesticide levels beyond glyphosates, and then repeat this test over time. So what it see as you continue doing what you're doing and continue to take L-glutamine and acetylcysteine, stabilize your blood sugar, keep your autoimmunity down, getting plenty of rest. As you continue to do all those things, your system gets healthier, your immune system gets healthier. You stop having these chemical immune tolerance reactions. And if your chemical immune tolerance reactions are, shifting all into the left, in the green area and not in the red and yellow, then that would be ideal. At that point might be a good idea if you really want to push it and check the heavy metal and do a challenge test and so forth.
Okay. Yeah.
You guys have any other questions?
Yes, actually. I know I mentioned there's two actually. The first one is I still don't sweat properly, and I guess that's just kind of how it's going to be.
I mean, just make sure you're not dehydrated.
Mm-mm.
Are you sure? Positive.
Yep.
Okay.
It's my mom and my grandmother were the same way. They don't sweat. Like we'll kind of like beat up a little bit in certain areas of our body, but I just get overheated before, and like everyone's like drenched in sweat, and I'm just hot, and my face is dry.
Okay. I mean, I really don't know what that is. I mean, it could if it's your whole family genetic link that's doing it, then there's some genetic issues there.
I think so. The other part was I used to tan really, really easily and really well. Which changed, I want to say, like in my late 20s. And I felt like as my body just continued to just have all the flare-ups, and I hadn't changed my diet yet, and I was stuck medically. I just stopped being able to really tan. I recently took a trip and I came back and I had been able to actually, like, my skin did change color, but I realized like something is almost like blocking me for my skin to change, because my skin tone was always a little bit darker, like naturally. And so I've always just in the last, I want to say 5-6 years, I've just been paler and I have a really hard time tanning. And it's just something that I'm not really sure what that could be a link to.
Are you
I
getting
feel
are you getting sunburn easier when you try to tan?
mm,
No.
mm,
So I know, like, for people that are trying to tan and they just don't have tolerance anymore and they get sunburn really easy, that we use prostaglandins to help support that, and this seems to work well. Prostaglandins are like compounds that healthy fats make, like olive oil,
okay.
fish oil, walnut, blackcurrant, seed oil. I know you're taking some, um, but I'm not sure if it's specifically related to that. I'm not sure what happens to like cells, dermal cells over time. I'm not sure what that is. My only
Yeah.
guess would be if it's you're getting more sunburned that I've seen clinically definitely work is to increase your dosage of prostaglandins. Like, and you should be
Okay.
doing that anyways, like for pre-pregnancy. Uh,
Right.
Olive oil, blackcurrant oil, even primrose oil, fish oil, flaxseed oil. Just get a diverse source of fatty acids into your diet.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Yeah, that works. I
The
think that
No comment.
no, we're good to go.
Okay, so you guys still about a year away, right, for trying to start a family, somewhere around there?
We're like, can we push it out a little longer?
Yeah, it's totally up to you.
And I think
We
it's
want
time
to
to have kids.
travel.
Okay, well, the key thing is you definitely want some time. Like this panel that showed up array 11 it's a pretty important panel because it's not really measuring just chemicals that you may be having reactions to, but it's also measuring some degree of your chemical tolerance. And you don't want your chemical tolerance to get worse. You want it to get better, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, it could be 5 months, 6 months, something like that down the road, you want to retest this and make sure this is okay. Then if this
Okay.
is okay, like you can then go and really check to see if your loads of chemicals with a challenge test is something you want to pursue or not. Um, and then we'll get, at some point you should do the pesticides test before your pregnancy. So maybe a good way to do it is like 6 months out, do the urinary pesticide Genova cancel. We do it through Great Plains, and then we can do this array 11 again, and then just continue with what you're doing unless you have any no, if you continue to just stay on track with what you're doing, just that's great. Unless any new symptoms develop, let's just plan out getting these tests done in about like 6 months and then
Really
going from there.
Okay. Um, okay, that works. So January for that test. And I know you're not going to be seeing patients past May.
I'm taking a sabbatical in June. We'll get it done before then.
Okay. Okay.
You'll be set and on your way. You're doing perfect.
I know, but I still want to pick your brain through my pregnancy and after.
We'll figure out some good people for you.
Okay.
Work
All
with.
right.
Okay.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.